Shirley Sedawie Oration, the annual lecture of the Council of Christians and Jews. And we were looking for an orator, and sometimes we base the timing of these meetings as to who's around and who's available. And we discovered that there's an international guest that we had an opportunity to hear from. So we wanted to leverage that opportunity. We actually moved the date of this meeting to allow us to use Rabbi Rosenthal in timing of him being here. So I wanted to take this opportunity to welcome Rabbi Ed Rosenthal. He'll probably tell you a little about himself as well, but I'm going to read you his bio so we know who we're about to hear from. Rabbi Ed Rosenthal was born and raised in St. Louis in the United States. He developed a passion for snorkeling in Judaism, but decided to initially challenge that energy into becoming a rabbi. For 4 years, in the late 80s and early 90s, he was the first full-time progressive rabbi in New Zealand, serving Beth Shalom in Auckland, Temple Sinai in Wellington, and the Dunedin Hebrew congregation. He then returned to the US, spent 8 years as a rabbi of a small synagogue in Texas, and then for the next 23 years worked with Jewish college students through an organization called Hillel, the Foundation for Jewish Campus Life. In 2022, he finally combined his love of Judaism and his passion for the ocean by creating Repair the Sea, an organization called Tikkun HaYam in Hebrew, which is the one and only Jewish environmental organization that focuses solely on water. Their mission is to share the spiritual wonders of water and the sea from a Jewish perspective, promote interfaith harmony, so a perfect speaker for us today, and cooperation, and raise awareness and encourage actions to address the many threats facing the aquatic environment. Rabbi Ed wants to show the wonders of the underwater world through Jewish eyes, while raising awareness about the myriad threats it faces. So with that, I invite Rabbi Ed Rosenthal, whose topic is Spirituality of the Sea. Your trip to the beach will never be the same.
So Tikkun HaYam is based on the Jewish tenet of Tikkun Olam. And the organization, as Alex said, I worked for Hillel, Foundation for Jewish Campus Life, for 23 years, engaging with Jewish college students. And so, in order to, when they're college students, they don't necessarily want to come to a religious program. So we would find as many different ways to engage them as possible. So one of the ways that was done at my Hillel was, I'm an avid scuba diver, so I started a Jewish scuba club. It was open to anybody, but since I was the advisor, and the club was called Scooby Jew, and as I said, it was open to everybody, and I loved when non-Jewish students would come up to me and say, "Yo, Rabbi Ed, I'm a Scooby Jew." I'd say, "Yeah, you're a Scooby Jew." So it took me, and so it was a great way to engage students. But then my wife and I moved to Tampa Bay in Florida, where I became the regional director of a number of campuses, and one of our schools didn't have a Hillel at all, so I had to start the Hillel. But there was a very small liberal arts college, but their biggest major was marine biology. And so I thought, this is great, I'll use Scooby Jew to engage the students. But their passion for the marine environment was already being fulfilled by their studies. So I had to find a new way to sort of pull them in. And as hopefully, maybe you all know, in the Bible, water is addressed, but really on a very superficial level. I mean, it's the agent for miracles. It's an agent, the flood, parting the Red Sea, Miriam as well. It's an agent for purification. In the Jewish tradition, the tradition mikvah, of ritual immersion. In the Christian tradition, of baptism. And yeah, pretty much that's it. I mean, there are a few other places here and there. So my personal area of study for the past 30 some odd years has been Kabbalah, which is Jewish spirituality. And so in order to connect with the students, I did sort of, no pun intended, a deep dive into our tradition to find out the deeper essences of water. And so I'd like to share some of that with you, if you don't mind. But before we get started, there are a few things we all should know about water. Now, you probably know much of this, but allow me to try to think about the characteristics that we're going to address now and think on a spiritual level, not just on the scientific level of what this really is. Water is the most abundant substance on Earth. There's more water on Earth than anything. I'm going to go quickly through it. Water is the only substance on the planet that occurs naturally in all three states of liquid, gas, and solid. Think about that. The only substance, nothing else. Water is the only liquid on Earth that can sustain life. You can put a goldfish in a bowl of milk and it will die. You put a goldfish in a bowl of Coca-Cola and it will die. Put a goldfish in a bowl of rum and it will die. It will die happy, but it will die. You put a goldfish in a bowl of water and it will live. At least for a while. If you got it in a plastic bag from a carnival, it doesn't last very long. This is our planet. 70% of the planet is water. And the ocean produces 50 to 85% of the oxygen on Earth. That's more than all the rainforest, trees, and plants on the planet combined. So when people talk about the rainforests being the lungs of the planet, it's actually not true. The rainforest is more like the window unit. The ocean is the lungs. There are two lungs and only one ocean, so I gotta say, the ocean is the lung of the planet. Interestingly, more people have walked on the surface of the moon than have reached the deepest part of the ocean. Think about that. Now, remember, it exists in all three states of liquid, gas, and solid. The troposphere, where our atmosphere, where our climate is created, contains 99% of the atmosphere's water vapor. And there's as much water in the form of vapor in the troposphere as there is in the ocean. Water cannot be carbon dated. In other words, it has no beginning and it has no end. And the amount of water on the planet today is the same amount of water that was on the planet when it was formed. It doesn't go away. It follows that hydrological cycle of liquid evaporating into gas, coming back to Earth as water or as snow or as ice, and so on and so forth. And that process just continues. Now there's another form of water, and that's biological water. The human body is 60 to 70% water. The human brain is 80% water. Human blood is 92% water. Some people say it shares the same salinity as the ocean, although the ocean has different salinities in different locations. So in other words, if you weigh 75 kilos, about 37 kilos of you is water. Okay, we're sort of like just big water balloons that move around all over the place. Okay? Surprise. And it's a very simple fact. No life exists or comes into existence without water. The reproductive process without water doesn't happen. A baby in its mother's womb lives in the most unnatural environment. 9 months, it lives in water. And there's a beautiful midrash in the Jewish tradition that says, in the womb, the baby has infinite knowledge of the universe, engulfed in the water. But it can't come into the world knowing everything. So just before a baby is born, an angel touches its lips and forgets everything. And this is the fingerprint of the angel. I mean, really, what else is it there for? Okay, so Carl Sagan, who you all probably remember, he was the Neil deGrasse Tyson in the 20th century. In his book, The Demon-Haunted World, he said, the notion that science and spirituality are mutually exclusive does a disservice to them both. And to me, it's very true. In our day and age, science has become the orthodoxy. You can't question it. But at the same time, there's so much division that if you accept science, you have to reject religion. And if you're religious, you have to reject science. But what Carl Sagan said is, no, that's not true. They're not mutually exclusive. And frankly, from my perspective, they sort of go hand in hand, like a hand in a glove, you might say. So, water in the Bible, in the Torah. If we're going to start learning some Bible, and we're going to talk about water, we got to go back to the beginning. I got this really cool laser thing that I love. The most famous line of literature ever. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created. Oops, sorry, wrong one. Hit one button. I want the laser. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God hovered on the waters. And God said, Vayomer Elohim Yeor Vayor. God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light that was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness He called night. And it was evening and morning one day. Everybody knows that, right? It's a famous passage. Okay, that's it. If we move on to the next section, the very next verse, hit the right button this time. And God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse and divided the waters which were under the expanse from the waters which were above the expanse, and it was so. And God called the expanse, the word there is heaven. I'm going to use the Hebrew word, shamayim. Okay, shamayim means, well, we'll talk about that in a second. And God called the expanse shamayim, and there was evening and there was morning, a second day. And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear, and it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters God called seas. And God saw that it was good. Okay? That's the second day. So, first day, God creates light. Second day, God separates the waters, the upper waters from the lower waters. And the upper waters God calls shamayim, which in modern Hebrew is translated as sky. And the lower waters are called the sea. Does anybody see a problem in that text? This can be sort of interactive, so if anybody see any problems in that text? Sorry?
It's interesting.
It's interesting, but there's a fundamental problem.
How do you keep them apart?
Sorry?
How do you keep them apart?
Well, that's a good question. What's the other possible problem? It's a big problem.
He's already mentioned the waters previously.
He's already mentioned the waters previously.
They're
Yeah.
already there.
Say that again,
They're
Rabbi?
already there.
Yeah, I'm going to extrapolate a little bit out of what you're saying. Yes, sir.
There's an ambiguity about heaven, I suppose.
Very good. There's an ambiguity about heaven. That's absolutely right. Let me talk about Rabbi Morgan's first. He said the water's already there. Remember, God said, let there be light, and there was light. God created the light. The water was never created. As Rabbi Morgan said, the water was just there. So there's a big question there. How is it possible that the water exists but wasn't created? And the other problem is what you just said, and that is, in the beginning God created Hashamayim, and down here, and God called the expanse Shamayim. Here's the problem. Recognizing that Shamayim cannot be created twice, the first day and the second day, the question has to be asked, what's the difference between the two Shamayims? Reshit Elohim et Hashamayim, and later on, Vayikra Elohim et Harakia Shamayim. You can't have it, you can't create something twice. So, Shamayim of the second day clearly represents the upper waters of the troposphere, which is often referred to as the aerial ocean. The Shamayim of the first day is distinguished by the definite article. This letter right there in Hebrew is the definite article. So the difference is, the first one is Hashamayim, the second one is simply Shamayim. Hashamayim. Shamayim means sky. It does mean heaven. But the heaven that maybe we're thinking about with regard to angels and wings and all kinds of harp music and hymns for all eternity. Sounds like fun. Anyway, Hashamayim is a different issue. So what is Hashamayim? Psalm 115, it mirrors Genesis 1, and it says, Hashamayim Shamayim Ladonai, the Haaretz Natan Le'Nedam. The Shamayim, with the definite article, the Shamayim, is the Shamayim of God, but the dry land was given to humans. So what it's clearly saying is that there's a distinction between what is God's Shamayim and what was given for people. And you know, Well, I'll get to that. Now the Kabbalah teaches, Kabbalah is the genre or the part of the Jewish tradition which presents the spiritual teachings of Judaism. It also, there's a section of Kabbalah which is referred to as Ma'aseh Bereshit. It's sort of an esoteric area of teaching that talks about the works of creation. Because if you just look at the Bible on the literal level, it's hard to figure out. You get those 6 days and that's it. Whereas the Kabbalah delves into the Ma'aseh Bereshit, the spiritual works that brought about the physical universe in which we live. So according to the Kabbalah, even the shapes of the letters can convey meaning. So when you see that word Shamayim, how many of you read Hebrew? Okay, if you read Hebrew, what do you see right there? The word is mayim, which means water. Means water. And then shamayim, that shin, makes this word shamayim. Now, Rashi, one of our great sages, said that you should read it not just as mayim, but rather shin mayim, meaning sham mayim, there's water up there. But that was just Rashi's interpretation. But if you look, since we can learn from the shape of the letters as well, what do you see in that shin? A crown, very good. What else might you see in it? Waves. What else might you see? Sorry? Oh, a boat, that's good. A 3-masted schooner, I like that one. Anybody else? What else might you see there?
Noah's Ark.
Noah's Ark, that's a good one. Anybody else? What else do you see? Anything? How about what we just learned earlier? Water is the only substance that exists naturally in our world in all 3 states of liquid, gas, and solid. So when you're talking about shamayim, but remember, what was different between the shamayim of the first day and the shamayim of the second day? The shin represents the 3 states of water. Liquid, gas, and solid. And it is this shamayim which precedes everything. Ha-shamayim. Now, what the definite article does, it encompasses the totality. So for example, in Hebrew, teva means nature. Ha-teva means, with the definite article, is best translated as the laws of nature. Okay? So, and what we learn from that, I won't go into it, that'll be too much. So, ha makes it an all-encompassing area, an all-encompassing concept. So, Bereshit Elohim et ha-shamayim. So the question is, what is the totality? You've got the 3 states of liquid, gas, and solid, of mayim, and the definite article. One of our great sages, Ramban, wrote into his commentary to that chapter, that section of Genesis. He wrote, "Now listen to the correct and clear explanation of the verse in its simplicity. The Holy One, blessed be He, created all things from absolute non-existence. Now we have no expression in the sacred language for bringing forth something from nothing other than the word bara, Bereshit bara Elohim. We have nothing but bara, created. Everything that exists under the sun or above was not made from non-existence at the outset. Instead, God brought forth from total and absolute nothing a very thin substance devoid of corporeality, but having a power of potency, fit to assume form and to proceed from potentiality into reality. This was the primary matter created by God. It is called by the Greeks Hiuli. After the Hiuli, nothing else was created, but God formed and made things with it. And from this Hiuli, God brought forth everything into existence and clothed the forms and put them into a finished condition. Know that the Shamayim and all that is in it consists of one substance, and the earth and everything that is in it consists of one substance. The Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, created these 2 substances from nothing." So I would present to you that Bereshit bara Elohim Et HaShamayim. HaShamayim is this primordial substance from which everything else was formed. Bara is create from nothing. Everything else is formed using that primordial substance, which is water. But not water as we know it, in the liquid form. It's that primordial Hiyuli. And what did we learn before? Well, I didn't include this, I should have. I did, biological order. Every living being is made up mostly of water. Life doesn't exist without water. Life doesn't come into existence without water. So we're looking at something that's, there we go. And the only thing which precedes HaShamayim is Elohim, God. Okay. Psalm 95. Asher lo HaYam. The sea is God's. And remember from Psalm 115, but the dry land was given to humans. You know, it's a simple fact. You can put a human being on a mountaintop, in a desert, in a forest, in a jungle, in the plains, on the beach, in a city, in a village, in a town. You can put a human being anywhere on dry land. That's what was given to us, and that person will survive. Yes, if with the proper skills. You drop a human being in the middle of the ocean, and that individual will be dead within a matter of minutes to hours. Why? The sea is God's. The sea is God's. Asher lo HaYam. That's what it is in Hebrew. Now, also, Hebrew is an amazing language. Hebrew loves acronyms. Where you take multiple words and you take the first letter or something and turn it into something. So when I said Ramban was the one who gave us that last commentary, his name was actually Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, but they take the first letters and turn it into Ramban. Hebrew does that all the time. So if you take this passage, Asher lo HaYam, and you turn it into an acronym, what you get is Elohim, the name of God, from the first chapter of Genesis and the creation of the world. Now the thing about Hebrew is, or I should say, the Torah. How many of you had bar mitzvahs? Okay, if you had, only a few. The hardest, for those of you who don't know bar mitzvah, you probably know, it's when the kid turns 13 and gets called to the Torah for the first time. The hardest part about preparing for a bar mitzvah is, Alex?
Reading the readings.
Yeah, why?
Because the Torah doesn't have grammar.
But, yeah, in the form that we read the Torah in the synagogue, it doesn't have any vowels. So Hebrew has 22 letters, and they're all consonants in the alphabet, but 10 vowels. And you can put any combination of vowels to any letters, so, that's the funny thing. I mean, since we're talking the Council of Christian Jews and Jews, there's a famous, because what that means is you can read a single word any number of ways. And the question is, what's correct? The answer is, all of them are correct. And you can get different meanings from them. So there's a famous medieval Christian theological debate about how many angels could dance on the head of a pin, right? Well, we didn't have that luxury. In the Jewish community, we were arguing, do you read the word this way, or do you read the word that way? We don't know. But our tradition teaches, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. Both of them are correct, because it's both the words of the living God. So, and in the original form we were taught, the Torah didn't even have spaces between the words. It was just one long collection of letters. And it wasn't codified as far as vowels and even separation until the 2nd century of the Common Era. So we went 1,500 years without knowing exactly how to read things. So you can read words with different vowels and gain new, deeper meanings. So, Asher lo HaYam, we see Elohim within that phrase. But if you change the vowels and the spacing, you get El HaYam. God is the sea. God is the sea. Now, I can't just present this from the Jewish perspective. Okay. And Archbishop, I hope you'll forgive me if I get something wrong. But the Gospel of John, chapter 5, verse 8 says, the Spirit, the water, and the blood agree as one. The Spirit, the water, and the blood agree as one. Water is the only substance that exists naturally in our world in all three states of liquid, gas, and solid. The Holy Spirit is gas, God the Father is liquid, and blood is Jesus. Okay. And then, when you look to 2 Peter 3:5, by the word of God, the earth was formed out of water and by water. Sefer HaYam is a 2nd century, a 3rd century Kabbalistic text. And in a very brief nutshell, Sefer HaYam is one of these texts that addresses Maaseh Bereshit, the works of creation. And basically the Kabbalah teaches that the world in which we live is a reflection of true reality, which is referred to as the Ein Sof, the infinite realm. And the infinite realm, call it God, call it whatever you want, but it's a very complex thing, which I won't get into. I normally teach a 12-week introduction to Kabbalah course, which I'm going to try and condense into 1 foot, which I can't. But suffice it to say, according to the Kabbalah, everything in this world is a reflection of the Ein Sof. And the primordial force of the Ein Sof is referred to as the light. This infinite, endless emanation of energy that contains everything that ever is, was, or ever be within it. But in its non-corporeal, in its spiritual state. There's no physicality in it. And everything it contains everything. And we, each of us, everything on the planet, in the universe, is a mere reflection of its true spiritual essence in the Ein Sof. And so Sefer HaYam here asks a very specific question because it deals with the works of creation. And what it says is, if everything in this world is a reflection of its true spiritual essence in the Ein Sof, what in our world is a reflection of the infinite light? And Sefer HaYam here is explicit. It says, and this is, our tradition teaches this was given by God to Moses at Mount Sinai. It says, or, HaYam Shamayim, the infinite light is, in this world, the life of water. So for lack of a better term, the infinite light can be referred to as God, from the Jewish perspective, as God Elohim, from a Christian perspective, God the Father. In other words, according to the Kabbalah, the reflection, not the manifestation, I'm sorry, I have to change that. The reflection of God in our world is water. Oh, and I forgot one thing. That second verse, the Spirit of God hovers on the water, or hovered on the water. Virtually every single translation you will ever find of that verse says the Spirit of God hovered or moved on the water. Because we assume that creation took place in the past, yes? However, if you read the Hebrew, Baruch Elohim merachefet al pnei hamayim. Merachefet is actually a present tense verb. It should read, the Spirit of God is on the water. So, and remember, nowhere in the text in Genesis does it say God created water. So the answer is hiding in plain sight. Elohim is reflected in our world as water. Now go back to what we said at the very beginning. No life comes into existence without water. No life is sustained without water. There is no, as Alex said, my family just went through a hurricane. My wife was very upset with me that I wasn't there. You can't stop a hurricane. There's no force on this planet that can stop water. If there's a flood, it will stop, nothing will stop it. It's powerful, it is strong. At the same time, it's merciful and life-giving. If you're in the desert, all you want is Water. And we speak, in our tradition, we refer to God as HaMakom, the omnipresent one. God is everywhere. Water is everywhere. It's in us. It's in the atmosphere. It's in every river. It's rivers, lakes, oceans, everywhere. So, according to this, the reflection of Elohim, of God in our world, is water. Asher lo HaYam, the sea is God's. But that doesn't stop humans from pumping millions of tons of raw sewage into the ocean every day around the world. The sea is God's, but that doesn't stop humans from dumping over 1 billion pounds of plastic into the ocean every year. Not just once, every year. The sea is God's, but because of sewage, agricultural runoff, and lawn fertilizer, humans are adding too much nitrogen to the water and creating dead zones, causing toxic algae blooms and killing millions of marine animals every year. If the sea is God's, how can we stand by and allow this to happen? If God forbid, then, Vicar, forgive me, if God forbid somebody went into this gorgeous church and dumped sewage on the altar, if somebody went into your synagogue, Rabbi Rosenthal, and vandalized the walls, if somebody went into any of our houses of worship, I don't live here, any of your houses of worship here in Malvern, and desecrated them, there would be outrage. There would be, you would call the newspaper, the news, the police. But the sea is God's. And look what we do. Look what we do. So my question to you, or I should say my challenge to you, what do we do about it? What do you do? I mean, I just say, I'm just one person. I can't do anything. Margaret Mead said, never underestimate the power of what a small group of committed people can achieve. And then she went to say, in fact, nothing ever happened other than that. Nothing's ever been achieved. So the question that I would present to you is, what are your churches doing? What are your synagogues doing to reduce this pollution? Now I have to say, living in the United States, and I have to qualify that, I live in Florida. And all these smiles are telling me, you know what I'm about to say. Florida is a wonderful place to live, but it's very backwards. It's very backwards. I mean, our big achievement where I live, and I live in a city which is a bit more progressively minded than most of the state, our big achievement is we banned straws. That's it. I mean, we have recycling, but only about 9% of what is supposed to be recycled actually gets recycled. We don't have community composting. We don't have a ban on single-use plastic bags. And it's a pretty sorry state. But every individual can make a difference. So for example, did I leave it at the restaurant there? I did. My bag, my bottle. We went out to lunch earlier, I left my water bottle. We have to go back. I have a water bottle. I will never use a single-use plastic water bottle. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands to see who does, but be aware that around the world, every day, 500,000 water bottles are purchased every minute. Every minute! And they all end up either in the ocean or in the landfills or just on the side of the road. And that's just water bottles. Every piece of plastic that has ever been created is still on the planet because it's estimated to take about 450 to 500 years for plastic to break down. And when it does break down, it breaks down into what are referred to as microplastic. And microplastic in the ocean or in any water body gets eaten by the fish. And through the process of bioaccumulation, little fish eats the microplastic and absorbs the toxic chemicals because it can't digest them. It gets absorbed into their tissue. Then a bigger fish eats a little fish, and it compounds until it ends up on your plate. So there's so many factors to realize that we don't think about, because when it comes to the ocean, out of sight, out of mind. You go to the beach and it looks beautiful. How many of you go to the beach ever? You're Australians, everybody has to go to the beach at one time or another. You go to the beach and it's beautiful. But what I want you to do now is I want you to go to the beach and I want you to think about it differently. I want you to go to the beach and I want you to remember Psalm 95. Asher lo HaYam. The sea is God's. And we have been put on this planet to be caretakers and stewards of God's glorious creation. And we can contribute to that with little steps. Don't buy single-use plastic. Use reusable products. There's so many things that you can do. And I've seen it all over the place in Melbourne. You guys have a great situation here, far better than Florida. But I want you to see the reflection of God in the water. And from now on, look at it as such. Because I believe personally that which brings life to all beings on this planet in its physical form deserves our reverence. And on a spiritual level, it's the reflection of God. So I thank you all very much for letting me be here today.
Before you finish up,
Yes.
Let's see if we have any questions from the audience, and we'll take some Q&A. If anyone has any questions, as you think of them, I'll ask the first one,
Yes.
and then we can open it up to anyone else. We said in the introduction that you do some interfaith work. Have you
Yes.
done something what the organisation does in an interfaith space, which would be...
Sure, absolutely. One of the biggest polluters of the marine environment is single-use plastic cutlery. If you go to the beach, you'll see plastic knives, forks, and spoons all over the place. So when I worked for Hillel, I was working with college students, and in 2019, before the pandemic, I conducted a survey of my Hillel colleagues to ask them how much single-use plastic did they actually utilize. Because when you work with college students, if you don't feed them, they don't come. So it was atrocious, the amount of single-use plastics that Hillels around the country were using. So I did some research to find a company that manufactured all-wood single-use cutlery that you could use once and it easily composts. There's no chemicals, there's no lacquers, polymers, or glue. It's just wood and water. And you can compost it in 3 or 4 months, or even if it ends up in the landfill, it will break down without any toxic residue. So I reached out to this company, and as it turned out, it was owned by a young Jewish guy. And I said to him, here's my vision. I want to see as many Hillels in North America as I can to get off single-use plastics. So the problem is your product is twice the price of plastic cutlery at Costco. And no cash-strapped organization is going to spend twice the amount of money for something that they use once and throw away. So we negotiated, and he agreed to give us a below wholesale discount for any Hillel that would switch to his product, to the compostable from plastic. And we crunched the numbers and found that for a Hillel that served 100 meals a week in 2019 before the pandemic, the difference between his product and plastic was only $200 a year. So I found a donor who agreed to pay that difference for any Hillel that would switch. And so in the end, I got 53 Hillels to switch. I gave away $10,000, and we removed 186,000 pieces of single-use plastic from the environment. And it was great. And then I went back to him, I said, this is wonderful, but why just Hillels? What if the Jewish community could be the spearhead to remove single-use plastic from the environment? And what if we could get every Hillel, every synagogue, every day school, every Jewish federation, everybody off single-use plastics? He said, that's great. I'll extend the discount to them as well. And I said, fantastic. But why just the Jews? I said, what if the faith-based community in North America could spearhead this movement? And he said, you know what? You are absolutely right. And he extended the discount to any faith-based organization. So one of the things we're doing to work with other groups in the interfaith work is to get churches and mosques and temples to get off single-use plastics at this discounted price. And full disclosure, we don't make a penny off this. My board is very upset with me. Because I want the barrier to participation to be as low as possible. Because after the pandemic, the supply chain debacle and all, the cost is now about $450 a year if they serve 100 meals a week. But most churches aren't serving 100 meals a week. And so it's really turning out to be something that's growing. And that's one of the areas that we're working with other groups.
Well, as I mentioned to you earlier, I go to a few different synagogues, and I know some of the synagogues definitely are using either the wooden cutlery that you talked about, or washable cutlery as well. So that's definitely something that's certainly happening in this community.
As I said, Australia is far ahead of us.
Yeah. So any questions from the audience? You were that clear.
It's not a question, it's just a story to share. My wife and I were traveling up in Cape York, which is the very top of Australia, very, very remote. And we went to a beach that was proclaimed to be the most beautiful beach in Australia. That's a difficult claim, but no one else was there. I mean, it really was lovely, except that part of the beach was entirely covered with plastics and rope and all that kind of stuff that had shipped in from the ocean. That was a point of delivery, and it was the most disturbing thing to see. Really upsetting.
You go to beaches, tourist beaches, that look clean, but when you get away from where everybody is going, you'll see, and it's pretty atrocious, even in Australia. And even those beaches that look beautiful. I was in New Zealand last week, and I was walking on Milford Beach in Auckland. Not a single snack bag, not a single plastic bottle, not a single straw or plastic cutlery. But then I looked, you know how on the beach there are always strips of seaweed? I bent down and I looked, and in 10 minutes, I removed 76 microplastic chips. And the microplastic chips are worse than the bottles, because that's what really kills the marine life. And it was a pristine beach, and I did that in just 10 minutes. So one of the programs that we do, and Temple Beth Israel is participating, in the Jewish tradition we have on Rosh Hashanah a custom called tashlich, where we go to a body of water and we symbolically cast off our sins to enter into the new year by throwing pebbles or shells into the water, and they represent our sins, so we can enter the year with a clean heart. So a few years ago, I was teaching my Scooby-Jew students, a few of the students, about tashlich. And you know, when you work with college students, there's one in every crowd. And I told them we symbolically cast off our sins. And this one kid looks at me and says, "Rabbi, you know, there's already more than enough human sin in the water. Why don't we take some of it out instead?" And I said, "That's a great idea." So I organized a reverse tashlich. And I had 5 students. The college is on Tampa Bay. They've got a beautiful 1.5 long piece of property. And we cleaned the beach and some of the mangroves on campus. And those 5 students, in an hour, filled 6 huge trash bags. The following year, we had 10 students. And then we got this idea to go off campus and reached out to the synagogues in Tampa Bay. Long story short, 6 years later, next week is our 6th annual reverse tashlich, and we have 275 teams registered to participate on 6 continents in 22 countries. And we're anticipating over 3,000 people to go out as part of their high holiday observance and remove debris from the water. And it is open to anybody, so you don't have to be Jewish. In fact, we have a team in Kenya that, because I do some work with the United Nations Environmental Program, a team in Kenya, nobody's Jewish, has joined the reverse tashlich. And so it's open to everybody, and if the Council of Christians and Jews would like to co-sponsor with Temple Beth Israel, I think
well, it is something that happens on Clean Up Australia Day,
Sure.
which is a national initiative, and there's also in the Jewish community Mitzvah Day, and a lot of the Mitzvah Day activities are about cleaning up various parts of Melbourne as well.
Yes, I would say the difference, however, is that this is about, it's not a cleanup. It's a religious experience.
Right.
And so the idea behind it is to get us to recognize, I do cleanups all the time. I walk my neighborhood and I pick up trash. But when you see what you're doing, not as simply cleaning, but as doing something holy, the sea is God's, it changes everything. You know, I don't do this because the scientists tell me that the ocean is in danger. Because it is also a fact. The ocean as we know it is dying. And if the ocean dies, we all die. Jews, Christians, Muslims, it makes no difference. So if the scientists say to us, the ocean is fine, we don't have to do this anymore, great. So what? If the environmentalists say, it's all under control, fine, don't worry about it, you don't have to do it anymore. I don't care. I do this because I understand this is coming from God. The sea is God's. This is an ongoing process. We are responsible as the stewards of God's creation. So scientists, I follow environmentalists, I follow Torah more.
I think David has a question.
I was just citing the international nature of the problem.
Sorry?
The international nature of the problem, especially the origins of plastic rubbish in the sea. I believe that it's largely from African and Asian rivers.
It's actually from everywhere. I mean, we can't really point a finger that it comes from Africa and Asia. There are studies, the culprits that produce the most pollution currently, I just saw a study on it, China, India, and South Korea. But when you add runoff from agriculture, then the United States takes third place after China and India. So you can't say, when we do cleanups, and when I do cleanups in the Florida Keys, we find debris that's in Spanish, Portuguese, and Chinese. It's from all over the world. The ocean doesn't know any boundaries.
Okay, any other final questions?
Do you have a website?
Yes, it may be here. Any questions? Wait, back. There you go. That's our website, repairthesea.org.
Okay, so on that lovely end note, I want to call up Reverend Colleen O'Reilly to do the vote of thanks and final reflections.
Rabbi Rosenthal, you promised to transform a visit to the beach, and you have certainly achieved that. And I really appreciated you opening up the Hebrew scriptures. I'm always fascinated to realize the limitations of translation. And this afternoon you opened the scriptures to us in a fresh way. So we thank you very much for being with us and for your message. And we have here some water for you.
Oh, thank you.
Save your water.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
We'll be offering some refreshments shortly. Just need time to make the tea and coffee. And we hope you can stay and meet with the rabbi and talk with one another. And please give thought to the vision of the Council for Christians and Jews. We've come a long way since the days of discovering the mutual respect for one another, but there is so much more work to be done in terms of understanding and addressing issues of racism, the rise in anti-Semitism, the breakdown of community, and we have a role to play in the good of our society being cohesive. So please share your thoughts with us, send us emails, send us your thoughts, and above all, offer your prayers for the well-being of our whole society and especially our true faith communities, please. Thank you. Thank you.